New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's May 11th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Top of the morning, Yen.
Aww.
Hello.
All right, and Cheska Dainong.
Happy morning to all of us.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. We're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The first story, 4 teens in Japan were arrested on Monday after robbing at least 100 premium watches from a luxury shop in the Tokyo's Ginza district. The assailants put on face masks, threatened staff with knives, and broke showcases. They escaped in a rental car with a Switch license plate. While these 4 are being investigated, police believe there's one more suspect and are looking for where that suspect could be. Vietnam's Overseas Labor Center found that 23,412 Vietnamese have taken the Korean language proficiency test in the last 10 years to get an employment permit. This is double the quota of foreign workers the two countries agreed on. Data shows most Vietnamese want to land a job in Korea's manufacturing industry. Competition is fierce, with 3 applicants for every place. Moving on, recently, this wanted poster has gone viral in South Korea. A month ago, an unmanned store owner posted these wanted signs of 2 elementary students who stole ice cream. Though parts of their faces have been blurred out, the poster specifies the name of their school, which class they're in, and almost their full name. Local residents could easily identify who these 2 kids were, and netizens who saw this poster have been debating whether this was an appropriate measure or if it was too extreme. Now we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. So these 2 kids stole ice cream and snacks worth around $12, and they tried to steal another batch a few hours later, but the store owner caught them red-handed. And the owner called the children's parents and asked for compensation, but allegedly they refused, which is why this store owner posted this wanted sign. The poster also demanded compensation of up to 50 times worth the amount stolen. To that, if you take a look at the screen, here's what a few online users had to say. Age doesn't matter, a crime is a crime. What's learned in the cradle is carried to the grave. Serves them right, but their parents should be held more responsible. Now, some were defending these children, saying revealing their picture is a bit too much, isn't it? This will scar these children for the rest of their lives. Now, what's your stance on this issue, Cheska?
You know, Yen, I'm truly conflicted and ambivalent. I do agree that children must learn that every action has consequences.
For sure.
However, these are teenagers and the amount was worth $12 and they're emotionally sensitive. But to reveal the faces of where they live, you know, what classes they go to, it can inflict some pain upon them that might be unnecessary. So I'm ambivalent as to if there might have been a better way or a different way to do this, and not knowing why the parents didn't compensate or why the children even started in the first place. It's kind of hard to tell.
I think that's why a lot of people are talking about this issue in the first place, because they can't decide whether this was the most appropriate measure or not. But what is your stance on this, Xiang?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't think being neutral clearly helps to evaluate the situation. I mean, I'd like to make 3 points. I mean, first of all, it was an unmanned shop, which means it relies on the dignity of the shoppers to maintain a certain order in the shop itself. Second, the owner of the store first contacted the parents of these youths, who reportedly refused to compensate for the amount of stolen goods. I mean, the owner only then, instead of reporting to the police, decided to, have a censored profile posted on his shop window. I think it's a very fair judgment as well. I mean, as they say in Korean, there's a saying that says, 바늘도둑이 소도둑 된다. A needle thief turns into a cow thief.
Yes.
And it does, you got to learn about responsibility of your actions. Third point would be juvenile delinquency and even hard crime is becoming quite a grave issue in Korea.
For sure.
Right, we have this youth voluntarily taking advantage of Korea's generous juvenile protection law, where you don't get criminally charged up to the age of 14. There were even cases of murder, and they knew about that they wouldn't get arrested. And I mean, with the spread of internet and everything, there's a lot of information, even when you're younger as well. You know about laws, you know about values, but if you're going to cheekily get around these social, structures, you should be responsible at certain level.
But yeah, if I may, sometimes kindness could teach more lessons. Just let me put that out there.
Yeah, but I don't think they don't know that robbing is a bad thing. I don't think they're that young. They're thinking, oh, I'm going to take something without paying and it's fine. Kindness means if the child makes a mistake, and that was clearly not a mistake. It was an act of
now,
robbery.
both of you guys are making very compelling arguments, and that is why this is a hot potato on the internet right now. But let's wrap up our news feed for this Thursday and move on to our discussion topic. So every May 11th is Adoption Day in South Korea. It's a day to improve public awareness about adoption and push for stronger rights for adopted children. That's why NewsGen will contribute by taking a look at how millennials and Gen Z think about adoption through our panels here in the studio. Before that, take a look at the screen. The history of adoption in Korea goes back to the Korean War in the 1950s. The 3-year war produced tens of thousands of orphans, including mixed-race children. Since then, most were sent abroad, to the point that South Korea gained an undesirable reputation as a country selling kids as one of its main exports. With weak child welfare laws and public awareness, adoption was perceived as something that should be hidden or not to be too proud about. But the country soon started establishing more organizations and welfare policies for adoptees and adoptive parents. Officials aim to foster more domestic adoption rather than sending Korean children abroad. We still need more work, but one silver lining is that millennials and Gen Z seem to be much more open to the idea of adoption than their parents' or grandparents' generations. Today, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. What's the legal and institutional groundwork for adoption here in Korea? How far have we come to ensuring a better, safer adoption process? 2. How do millennials, Gen Z in Korea perceive adoption? How is it different from previous generations? 3. How should the public be better educated about adoption? Today is Adoption Day here in Korea, and as we just saw in our video, Korea has tried its best to get rid of its notorious title, a country selling its orphans. And I guess designating May 11th as Adoption Day is just one of the many efforts Korean officials have tried to raise public awareness and promote better infrastructure. Here in the studio, what do you think, Xiong? What's the significance and history behind this day?
Yeah, so May 11th, the Adoption Day, has been around for almost 20 years. As it was announced in 2005 by the Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare. The official meaning is behind the date 11th, right? Adopting one, which signifies one family, adopting one child.
Oh, okay.
So 1 plus 1 becomes 11, according to the Health Ministry. So there's more meaning because May is also a month
for
of family
family.
in Korea.
And as we've covered on NewsGen, we've already seen Parents' Day, Children's Day, so it's definitely a month to commemorate families. Then Cheska, how far do you think South Korea has come in terms of adoption, and is the public better informed to, better perceive it?
I mean, I certainly hope so, and the fact that we're having this discussion today, I think is a very positive thing, because there certainly needs a lot of talk and a lot of changes. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, in the last 10 years, we currently have the lowest adoption rate at the moment of 263 children in 2021. Domestically, we have 11,000 approved adopted children. So that's less than 3% that was adopted 2 years ago.
I see.
So there definitely needs to be more changes. And, historically, Korea is a very homogeneous country, as we all know. So legacy, title, and name has been an important factor, for sure. So there have been some internal challenges that Korea needed to overcome in terms of being more open to adoption.
It's basically, there's still a lot of culture and stigma against this matter, for sure, then.
Absolutely. And the stigma, which you mentioned, Yeon, has made it difficult for families who have adopted or orphans to speak about their family situation. So I distinctly remember some of the heart-wrenching stories of orphans actually being publicly made fun at school or being called out for being adopted. People are asking, where's your mummy? Or like, why is your mum different from, how you look? And, growing up in States, I'm sure, and you too, but I've seen many adopted families. And we talk about it very openly, and sometimes
it's more of a social norm, people get accepted.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting to talk about. So it adds more diversity to the mix.
And we learn about that from a young age, that families can come in all forms. But I think the South Korean government is trying to bring this about in the society as well. So what are officials actually trying to do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the 2021 data of 492 successful adoption cases. Cheska mentioned, I think you said 263.
It's domestic plus international.
Exactly, that's 492.
Right.
But that even is the lowest that's ever been for Korea since statistics began in 1958. Right, so looking back at the past decade, in 2011, we've had around 2,500 children adopted, which has been decreasing on average, but never as low as 2021. Many experts blame this temporary drop on COVID-19 related limitations such as social distancing enforcement. Sorry about that. Korea's outbound adoption began in the 1950s as a consequence of the Korean War as well. So until now, an estimate of 200,000 children has been sent out of the country for adoption. However, from 2007, with the introduction of new adoption policies, domestic inbound adoption has surpassed outbound adoption.
Oh, I see.
So that's quite a positive note. If you think
It is
about
really.
it. Korea currently has a number of government support systems for the adopters as well, such as top-tier free healthcare service, all medical costs for disabled adoptees, as well as cash support, education, and consulting services for the families who adopt the orphaned children.
So we're seeing a lot more positive measures happen on this front.
Definitely.
But do you think this is because our generation has more positive views towards adoption?
To be honest, I don't think it's the case of just our generation. I mean, the older generation had a more positive view towards sort of adoption, as well as, you know, keeping everybody in a circle. Many experienced the Korean War firsthand as well, with many orphans in the country, especially for the baby boomers and Gen X growing up with, you know, genetically unrelated siblings, family friends, children, or even other orphans. Sort of a poorer but more socially generous generation than the millennials and Gen Zs, I would say. So let's have a look at some of the recent data regarding opinions on adoption. According to a 2022 survey, over 45% of unmarried people were positive about adoption. However, only 11% responded that they were willing to adopt even if they were biologically capable of giving birth. At 34.7%, the majority of the adoption positive respondents said they are willing to adopt if they cannot or do not want to give birth. This shows that whilst it seems that almost 50% are positive about adoption, it comes with a condition attached. 32% responded that they do not know at this stage, and for the remaining 22.3%, it was a strongly negative answer.
All right, then are there any other different perspectives on this matter then?
I think media definitely played a role in diversifying the spectrum of our perception. So there's certainly more positive because celebrities and influencers have been coming out, sharing, you know, real testimonials about what it's like to adopt and go through the process, which isn't easy, we must admit.
It's very complicated.
Very
process,
complicated,
yes.
lots of counseling, trying to understand the situation and actually adapt to it. But also, there have been some negative responses, as we all know, with the cases of Chongin adoptee,
Right.
which led to the murder of a young child.
Yeah.
So people are both very infuriated, but also very open and accepting as they get educated more and learning more about the
I think
situation.
people get worried as well when you hear about these cases. You know, what are we going to do about
Generalizing
the orphans?
to think
Yes.
that all cases are negative, which is always not true.
Which is not the case. If you look at the stats, actually, people who go through domestic violence who are orphans aren't that really high.
yeah,
you know?
very, very low.
It's a very low
in
case. The
comparison,
Chongin case, though it's very infuriating, is not commonplace among adoptees and adoptive parents. That's why they want to break through all these stereotypes and prejudice. And in order for us to do that, we need to see how perceptions could and need to change. And we'll take a listen to someone who's actually witnessed all of this right after this. To see how perceptions towards adoption have changed, we've prepared an interview with the founder and director of Life Together, Sarah Ko. Life Together is a nonprofit organization helping young adults who still couldn't find a family, as well as other orphans. So it's great to have you with us, Sarah.
Good morning.
Hello, Sarah.
All right, Sarah, I'd like to ask you the first question. Why don't you start us off by telling us more about how you founded Life Together and what this organization does?
Well, first, I appreciate you focusing on this topic today. My husband and I are both adoptive parents of two Korean kids who are now young adults. And when we moved back to Korea, my husband's a Korean citizen. When we moved back to Korea, it was logical for me to get involved in helping orphans and kids in welfare homes. And the more I learned about what faced them as they aged out, I heard repeatedly that the key factor for success was to have one caring, responsible adult consistently in their lives when they age out. And so that's how Life Together was born, to come up with programs and activities to build relationships. Relationship building is our key focus for Life Together.
All right. And Xiong, do you have any questions?
Yes, Sarah. I mean, compared to Korea, so you would know quite a lot about Korea as well. Your husband, you said, is a Korean citizen as well. How do people in the States think about adoption and adoptees in general?
I think we have a very different attitude. I read the statistic this week that 1 out of every 25 families in the U.S. that has kids has an adopted child in that family, which shows a significant number of people who have adopted kids. And our whole system is built around foster care, not institutional care. And the idea is to foster to adopt, which actually is currently illegal in Korea. You cannot adopt a child that you have fostered. But that's very common here with, I think this year we had 50,000 children adopted out of the foster care system into adoptive families. So we have a very different attitude, I think a much more positive and open idea toward adoptees and the whole idea of adoption.
Right, implementing foster care and actually allowing foster parents to adopt these children could be a really good blueprint for South Korea for sure.
Yeah, also just briefly, Sarah, do the foster family get sort of a decent sort of amount of support compared to the Korean adoptation system, you think?
There is financial support. I don't know that anyone would think that it's sufficient for everything you need to raise a child, but there is, yes, financial support.
Sure.
And Sarah, we're having a very active discussion here in the studio about adoption. Given the socio-cultural factors, Korea still has a lot of internal challenges of overcoming some prejudice and stereotypes associated with not just adoption, but about orphans as well. What can we do to change these perceptions to promote positive integration of these children into our homes and the society?
I think awareness obviously is probably a starting point. There are many people that I talk to in Korea who still are not even aware that welfare homes or institutional care exists. They think all the Korean orphans disappeared after the war. So just basic awareness, I think, is a beginning point. One of the things I like a lot about Korea is the very community and group-oriented focus versus our very individualistic society in the United States. And I think if that could carry over into the whole idea of adoption, it would be beneficial. One of the most common objections to adoption I hear in Korea is, why would you want to raise someone else's child? And rather than viewing it as someone else's child, as a community, they're our children. They're our nation's children. They're not something other than, they're not outside. And so focusing on society and incorporating them as a normal part of society, I think, is important. But help needs to be on all levels, from the national level, eliminating discrimination in job hiring policies, strengthening the support for unwed moms so the kids don't end up in welfare homes in the first place. That all is a governmental level. The cultural level, the media, what y'all are doing is wonderful to open the discussion, open people's ideas to think about it, not in a glamorous or romanticized way that the perfect cute little orphan gets adopted by Daddy Warbucks like in Annie, but a realistic idea of what adoption looks like. And then educational.
For sure, and I think that's what you've done for us today, Sarah. You've let us understand that in a tightly community-based society like Korea, we should acknowledge orphans and people who need to get adopted as our children.
yes, definitely.
All right, thank you so
And
much,
I think
Sarah.
if we all can,
Sorry, due
You're
to
welcome.
time, we have to cut you off here, but thank you so much. We hope to continue discussions next
Sarah.
time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
thank you.
All right, we're now going to use this time to hear what our global viewers also had to say about today's topic. So take a look at the screen to see what they thought about adoption. Mark Fox said, I'm Korean adopted. I have 2 adopted siblings. I married a 1.5 generation Korean and we have 2 children. My adoption experience is very different than others. I have a mother who believed my culture is important even though she's of European descent. Min Margie Yoongi Sally said, we're 3 siblings. My mom adopted my younger sibling. The good thing about adopting a child is you give love to another one who's been abandoned by their biological parents. If I have extra money, I'd like to adopt a child too. Jiawei Ki said, I think most likely if I get married and have a partner, I would most likely want to have my own biological child. I would definitely consider adoption if I still don't have children and am getting too old to have children. Now, I think this is a good segue for us to talk about our final thoughts. How would you guys like to see South Korea's adoption policies go?
Yeah, I mean, as we heard from Sarah as well, and I mentioned before, South Korea actually do have quite a decent adoption support system, like we have for the birth rate issue. But as Sarah mentioned, that was, I think, a key topic, a key discussion of the day as well. Having, these adopted children as thought as our nation's children,
Yes.
Having a sort of community involvement in the adoption process, I think is very important.
I love that.
As I mentioned before, during the wartime especially, the previous generations, the baby boomers and Gen X, we've all had, the trouble with having no parents, orphans on the streets after the Korean War, and it was much more of a generous, welcoming society. And I think as we become more individualized, more competitive as a society, it becomes more difficult for young adults like us to think about adoption, even in the situation we can't even
Living
have our
costs are
own
too
kids.
high. Yeah, for
exactly,
sure.
Yeah.
Even struggling to take care of ourselves, right?
Exactly. We don't even want to have our own children.
Exactly. But how could we better promote awareness then?
I think awareness, as Sarah mentioned, is the key thing. And a quote that I kind of go by is, we become orphans
Yes.
at one point. It's just a matter of time. So knowing
50-year-old orphans.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a matter of understanding that we're all in the same situation together, and we're not here to promote, irresponsible adoption or to raise adoption in a hasty way, but as you mentioned, to raise awareness of acceptance and generosity so that we understand that we're all in this together and there are children, not just your children or their children.
Right. It's not about encouraging everyone to adopt because it might not be an available option for
No.
you. It might not
Might not
be
be
in the
right for some people.
Exactly, but I think the motive of today was to understand that we need to be more accepting and allow more diversity here in society. All right, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang
My pleasure.
and Jessica Dainong.
Today was such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News
Generation.
Generation.